So now I'd like to introduce our presenter today. Christy Berghoef is an author, speaker, civil dialogue consultant, contemplative philosopher, pilgrimage leader, musician, and church planter. After receiving her BA in political science from Calvin University, she worked in the United States Congress. In 2024, she received a D.Min from Western Theological Seminary. Her latest book is called Rooted, the Memoir of Homecomings, which we're going to speak about today. It's a collection of essays about coming home. Her first book, which is called Cracking the Pot, was just re-released and is a companion to Rooted. So today's session, Coming Home, Bittersweet Discoveries. Thank you, Chris.
Well, thanks for having me today. I appreciate seeing all of your faces here. I just want to start off by sharing a bit of my story to give you the context for what I'm about to talk about. I grew up on a small 40-acre flower farm just south of town here. So I grew up in Holland. I was part of the tulip festivals and, snapping photos of the tulip on streets. I embraced the tulip theology, all the tulip things. So the community within Holland that I was raised in was a very conservative, Christian Reformed, Republican, white, middle class community. And these were good people. These are the people that taught me my foundational values. I also attended the Holland Christian schools and eventually went on to Calvin University. But being siloed in this community, this was the only reality I knew. It was a very particular way of seeing and understanding the world. Now, the underside of this is that we were often quick to demonize and dismiss people who didn't look like us, believe like us, think like us, talk like us, and so on. But we were somehow certain that we were justified in behaving this way because we assumed, I think, that as God's chosen people, we were being faithful to God's will and God's word. And I believe that genuinely we believe that. Most people believe that. Like there are 45,000 different Christian denominations today, and they all have different ways of approaching the biblical text, and they all feel certain that theirs is the right way. So we're no different from many other communities in this way. Well, I also grew up really close to the earth, and I'm going to touch more on that next week. We didn't have a lot of things growing up, but we did have the whole 40 acres, which was my playground growing up. I spent my summers climbing trees, catching frogs, running around barefoot through the woods and through the fields, swimming in the ponds. And also my cousins lived in the 40-acre farm across the street from me, so I had them growing up. And my grandparents lived in a little acre that was cut off the corner of our farm. So it was a very much of a closeness of family. That was also part of the context of growing up. Well, after college, I moved to Washington, D.C. and worked on Capitol Hill for a Republican. And it was here that my views really began to shift. And there were two things that led to this. First, I went on a trip to Israel with Ray Vanderlaan, who was my high school Bible teacher. And that really created this shift in my faith thinking, where before it was sort of an intellectual exercise for me before, believe the right things, sign on the dotted line, and you're good to go. And after that trip, I really started thinking about the way I was living. The outward expression of my faith became really important to me because I thought that is my testimony to the world about who my God is. So that happened. That was one thing that happened during my time in DC. The other thing is that I was no longer siloed in this place. I was exposed to all kinds of perspectives, to all kinds of human realities that I couldn't believe existed. I became aware of the complexities around human suffering and things that I just had no concept of growing up where I did. Well, the experience of working on Capitol Hill and the shifting of all of these things compelled me to go to seminary. So then I went to Calvin Seminary. And I met my husband, Brian, there, and we began planting churches. And so after 15 or so years planting churches out there in the world, being exposed continually to different realities, different perspectives, different beliefs, we were going to be moving back home. And my book talks about the reasons why we moved back home, my book Rooted. But there was a tremendous shift in my politics because my faith had expanded, my politics began to expand in light of the human realities and suffering that I was now becoming aware of. And so the last church plant we did before moving back here was in Washington, D.C. So we moved back there to plant a church. Our kids were in the public schools. We were living in a very diverse neighborhood. And I mean, we had embassies behind us in the alley. Across the street, we had homes with many families living in them with cracked windows repaired with tape and bed sheets for curtains. And our kids were in a school system, the K through 8 system that they were in had about 12 Caucasian kids, and 4 of them were mine. So it was a very eye-opening experience. You know, we were really exposed as well to a lot of the suffering and the obstacles that people are up against that I just had no idea. Because for me here, I would have thought if you work hard and get a job, you get ahead. It's that simple, but it's not when you have layers of systems holding you down. So having grown up here, I knew what likely lay ahead for us moving back here, and I was terrified. I was terrified. And we weren't just moving back here, we were moving back to the literal ground of my childhood, back to that 40-acre farm. And the thing is, back in the day, I was one of those voices that was condemning people who were like what I had become. So I knew what was coming. I'm going to read a little selection from here. And some of you have heard part of this. You've read part of it in the Reform Journal. But the context for this chapter is we've just moved from DC. We're on the way home. I've been bawling my eyes out in the car. And Brian is driving ahead of us in the U-Haul with all of our things. And I'm in the minivan with the kids and a few other items following him. So I'm getting over my emotional tears and my angst. I guess I still am holding a little bit of that. After the long slog through Ohio, we crossed under the big blue "Welcome to Pure Michigan" sign. And I was jolted to full wakefulness by the notoriously hard-scrabble Michigan highways, which tossed the van around as if we were driving down a rough gravel road. My mind began racing. What are we doing here? Will they even want us back home? All my fears and questions were met with silence as I dodged 6-inch deep potholes. We should have moved somewhere else. I wonder if this pocked war zone road was a warning. The kids began whooping it up in the back of the van. They were eager to live 2 flower fields and 1 alfalfa field away from Grandpa and Grandma and closer to their cousins. In DC, we lived on a busy street. Sirens screamed all day and night, and shouting voices swam from open windows across the thick, hot soup of summer night air. The ability to roam the wild country would be a welcome contrast. In the thrill of adventure, they seemed easily able to embrace what was ahead and set aside the sadness of missing their friends and neighbors. I decided to make an effort to meet them in their enthusiasm. I began the work of burying my grief and fears and hesitation in order to dig out the little pockets of hope that were hidden inside me. I joined them in pronouncing all the great things that were waiting for us in Michigan. Open fields, fresh air, small town, minimal traffic, great schools, a yard, a garden, Lake Michigan, Grandpa and Grandma, and sublime sacred silence. Maybe this would be all okay after all. The more mile markers the minivan trundled past, the more both my hopes and fears expanded inside me, while my breath felt squeezed out of my conflicted lungs. The confused state of my insides started spinning, bordering on nausea. Would the place and people of my hometown ever allow me to really feel at home? I was no longer part of the tribe, I knew that. While my values hadn't changed, the political expression of those values had shifted. This would be enough to make for a thorny existence in a conservative community. I knew this because there was a time when I was part of the hometown crowd that demonized people who were exactly like the person I had become. Being politically liberal was a grave sin, and I was sure the wider community would tell me in a variety of ways that I was unwelcome, unwanted, outside of the grasp of God's grace. The increasing joy and excitement on the faces of my little kids bobbing around in the rearview mirror offset my doubts and angst. Somewhere on Interstate 96, I resolved to endure anything as long as my kids were okay. Keeping them feeling safe, loved, valued, and nurtured would be my goal. I gripped the steering wheel and found myself praying that the challenges of coming home would not shatter their sweet, enthusiastic spirits. The landscape outside the window started to become familiar, like an old acquaintance at first, then like a longtime friend, and as we were pulling into the gravel driveway, as familiar as family. We were home. The garage door was a mosaic of welcome home messages from my niece and nephews, an unexpected surprise for the kids, a wee little seed of hope pressed into the soil of my mind. We climbed out of the van and stretched the crimps out of our muscles. Squealing, the kids skipped quietly inside like little grasshoppers. The screen door creaked open and slapped shut behind me. This was the house that would be our home, the home that my grandparents built and lived in during the latter half of their lives, the home that sat at the edge of the 40-acre farm my dad grew up on, that I grew up on, and where my parents still lived. I was flooded with the warmth of nostalgia. It was unexpected. My dried up eyes started to draw from a restocked reservoir. My memory called up the lingering scent of date-filled cookies, mothballs, Grandpa's Big Chief chewing tobacco, and Grandma's Avon skin cream. How were these scents so palpable, given that Gramps and Grams had been gone for years? Their smells must have saturated the carpet, soaked into the walls. I swear I could see my grandfather's bony frame, tucked into the corner of the room, sunk in his brown recliner, a stack of books beside him on the table, checkerboard cracked at the seams and repaired with layers of brittle masking tape, lying open and ready for the leather footstool. He looked up and called out to me, "Christy Ray, I've been waiting for you. Let's go, the board is ready." I could hear him as he always was. I could hear his voice coming from the corner of the room through his nearly toothless grin, wet tobacco wad set on the coaster on the table beside him. I squeezed my eyes against the tears, trying to escape, aching to turn back the years to simpler times when the world seemed a small and straightforward place. To sit at his feet and wait for him to slide the first worn wooden checker across the board. Home. Everything looked the same. Dark sienna living room carpet with smudges of rust color worked in, dark walnut cabinets with brass handles straight out of the 1970s lining both sides of the tiny galley kitchen. I moved down the hall and peeked into the small bathroom. Mustard yellow tub and golden yellow floor tiles, just as it had always been. One bedroom with lime green shag carpet that was all the rage in 1978, and a second bedroom with a more updated cream-colored Berber carpet. The kids scrambled downstairs to run around the wide open, unfinished basement. Winston shouted from the bottom of the stairs, "We can ride our scooters and rollerblades down here." I smiled at the thought and moved through the kitchen and out the back door. Stopping just beyond the edge of the yard, I kicked my shoes off, stepped into the field, and sunk my cramped, caged feet into the warm, just-turned soil of the back 40. Robins and blue jays were chattering wildly in the black walnut trees. Song sparrows fluttered at the bird feeder. I gazed across the field where acres of gladiolas were cracking through the soil, and my eyes lifted to the woods beyond. As I inhaled slowly and deeply, the sun-warmed soil wrapped itself around my feet, and the breeze threw open its arms as if to say, "Welcome home." I let myself fall fully into this unconditional embrace. The earth knew me. A voice from somewhere whispered to my heart that this patch of earth would love me, accept me, and understand me just exactly as I was in all my circumstances, regardless of how I fared in the world. Fresh air moved over the alfalfa field, carrying a hint of the neighbor's milk cows with it before flowing easily and fully through my lungs. My clenched muscles relaxed and eased. All my twisted, anxious nerves unfurled. This was the ground that had birthed me, nurtured me, and held me all those years. I knew for certain that this ground would hold me still. As I was easing myself into place, a small cloud of dust rose in the distance. I squinted as Mom and Dad emerged, rumbling across the field on the gator towards us. The kids ran from the house, squealing as their grandma and grandpa approached the yard. A smother of lanky little arms and legs wrapped around my parents like kite string knotted around a willow branch, and they were buried in affection. As that tight knot of love began to dissipate, Mom and Dad looked beyond my children to me, their open arms ready to embrace. I made my way across the yard and fell into them. I was home. So that begins, Rudin. So I was terrified to come home. I was terrified. I don't think I'd ever experienced such a rush of emotions from here to here that day we drove home. My views had shifted, my theology had expanded, my political perspective had changed, and I was really, really grateful for the values that had been instilled in me by this community. Those values continue to be the values that I stand on. Values like generosity and kindness and goodness and humility and lending a hand to those in need, refraining from gossip and slander, maintaining self-control, and the importance of always being truthful and honest, the importance of coming to the aid of people in distress, the importance of acknowledging the image of God in all people and treating them in a dignified way. Those values did not change. The expression of those values changed because my experiences and understanding of other people's circumstances underwent a huge shift. And again, I knew that outwardly seeing the shift in my views would be enough for life to be really hard coming back home. One of the hardest things to grapple with for me was that while in my heart and my mind, I was taking my faith more seriously than I ever had before, really challenging myself to consider what I believed and how that would impact the people around me. Thinking about, the way that showed up in the world, I knew would be misunderstood and instantly demonized and dismissed and condemned, often with no attempt to understand my perspective and what I had seen and experienced. So cracking the pot was mentioned in the introduction, and this was, I had published a book back in 2012. Whitfenstock published the memoir that tells the tale of all of these changes. Growing up in Holland, and all the settings I mentioned is all in here. And when that book came out, I opened the box, I saw the books, I saw my name on it, and I got so scared, I closed it up and I shoved it under the bed. I was so scared to actually let people know, that this is where I am now. Here's how I got there. So when Rooted came out, they decided, let's do a new edition of this because it gives a context for Rooted. So they kind of go together. Well, sometimes I describe the experience of coming home like being a square peg trying to squeeze into a round hole. And I really feared that I would have to cut off from my memory, from my heart, all of the experiences that I had in order to squeeze back in the hole that I once fit in living here. But ultimately, those realities can't be forgotten. You can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unhear the stories you've heard. I could not forget. And so instead I pivoted and I said, rather than try to squeeze in this round peg hole, I'm just going to chisel a new hole for myself. And then I'm going to chisel a whole bunch of other holes of all different shapes around me because I want everyone, regardless of where they are, regardless of how they believe, different from me, similar to me, everyone. I want everyone to have a home here. So that's kind of what my husband and I have been trying to be doing in our church planting now. So what is home? It's an interesting thing to think about. What is home? People define home in a variety of ways. For me, I would say home is that place where I am known and unconditionally loved despite being known. It's a place where I'm safe, regardless of differing views and perspectives and lifestyles and socioeconomic statuses. And for me, home has always involved a closeness to the earth, a closeness to the nature. I always need access to that to feel at home. Sometimes the idea of home can shift, I think, depending on our life stage, depending on the phase we're in. Now that my kids are growing up and they're kind of all moving out, I have one left in high school, the other three are out of the house, I start to think that I'm sort of cementing this place as home where I am now, because if we move and, do something else somewhere else, my kids come to a place, to a strange bedroom, to a strange house in a community they don't know. And so now I'm starting to feel this cementedness to this specific place. So it's an interesting thing to think about, but different people define it differently. There are phrases you hear, home is not a place, it's a feeling. I think that can be true. You can have more than one home. A lot of people in Holland are snowbirds. They have a place somewhere down south, and they have a place up here. Some people say home is where the heart is. That's another one. So I'm curious how you would define home. Does anyone want to share thoughts on that?
I just want to say I really appreciated what you just said about as your children leave, you think you're the one who has to provide stability and the home for them to come back to. But you're a lot younger than we are. And our children are now you.
Yeah.
And as you and their children are in, graduating from college and all those things. These are our grandchildren. And you have to move further and further off the stage, as I always say. My sister and I always joke, because we used to watch this one soap opera when we were kids, and we used to say they always trotted out the old people on Christmas, and we kind of feel like the old people now, they trot out at Christmas. So I think the the necessity for our age
Yeah.
is to make a home for ourselves.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. What a great thought. Other thoughts? Things that come to mind.
I wrote down something as you started talking initially. And the word doubt came up.
Mm,
And I thought, a home is where you don't really have doubt when you're there. It's your home. But when you go out in the world, doubt arises. And it's a devil.
mm.
It can be encouraging though, too. But doubt is something you have to learn about.
Mm.
And I think we all find that even still going on as we are in our seniorhood.
Thanks for sharing that.
You talked about the fact that you were very comfortable when you were growing up here at home.
Mhm.
Whatever made you move away from home?
Yeah, so well, after college, I moved to Washington, DC, and that's what I wanted to study. I was interested in politics. So but then after seminary, my husband and I became church planters. So typically you're moving a lot when you're planting churches. So I knew that was in the cards for us, moving a lot. So we did that as, we felt called to that ministry. So that's what led us to move. And I'm glad I did, because I think I've grown so much by being around other perspectives and cultures and ways of seeing the world and understanding the world.
Could you have done that here?
I think it's possible to do some of that here. Absolutely. I think, through reading books, through I don't know, traveling to different cultures, there's ways, but there's like my experience, for example, the first time I lived in Washington, DC, when I worked on Capitol Hill, was very different from my second experience when I moved into a neighborhood when, when I was exposed to really the hardships of the families that my kids were going to school with, all of that. I don't know that I could have really learned it and understood it in the way that I did by living in the midst of it. And seeing, some of these were the hardest working people. The parents of the kids that my kids were in school with, these are the hardest working people I have ever known in my life anywhere. Working often 2 full-time jobs, each parent, barely able to, pay the bills. One healthcare scare away from homelessness. And they're impoverished. They're living in poverty, and they're working so hard. And that's I grew up thinking if you're homeless, you're probably lazy. Also we interacted with a lot of, for example, Vietnam War vets in the streets, living in the streets, and hearing their stories, getting to know them was so powerful and helping me understand just the extent of what some of these folks are dealing with and going through. And yeah, so getting to know people in these circumstances, I think, went a long way in teaching me.
I want to corroborate your point on that. My wife and I discovered virtually the same experience you did, being a product of the Christian schools in Calvin and then joining the military for 35 years. Our first location was where we went to church. It was Church of Christ. And I was shocked to find out that the people there saying they had truth in their box and everyone else was wrong. And I thought, where have I heard this before? And then going through the next decades and meeting all sorts of people, I would answer the man in the front row that I don't think you can have this broader perspective until you get out and are elbow to elbow and it challenges you. At our storage building, I've got a picture of a boat up on the rocks, big ship, and it's on the rocks by the shore. And the caption says, "The perfect childhood is the poor preparation for life." And I thought that was crazy, but interesting at the same time, because as we felt we had the perfect childhood in Holland, you aren't really genuinely prepared for the vagaries of life when you get outside our cocoon.
Yeah.
And the difference, the divergence we felt is coming back to Holland. We were looking forward because we had lived all over the place. And we didn't find it any better than what you find in Holland, Michigan. And corroborating the lady's point in the back row, we're at that stage of life where our friends are having various ailments, issues, dementias, problems. And all of a sudden you come to the recognition, I am one kind of thing. And that drives its own set of adjustments and relearning and redefining. My storage building is filled with my historic past because you yearn for that love and that recognition of your dad, your grandpa's stuff. Their stuff, not theirs, but reflections of their stuff. Boats, in my case, are hanging all over the wall, and the history of Macatawa and the people and the things I loved. There's a yearning for longing. When I finished up with the military, you had to behave in a certain manner as a commander. You just can't willy-nilly be your jokey smurf, in my case, what you are, how you came from the factory. You've got to behave in a certain manner. So later at the Veterans Administration for 5 years when I was a chief there, I thought, you know what? I'm going to do an experiment. I'm just going to be myself and see if they can take it or how soon I get fired. And it turns out I didn't get fired. It got on just fine. But that notion of loved, wanting to be loved, your home longing, the connections to the past. We were very fortunate in Holland, Michigan to have that love and that embracing and so forth. And I don't step away at all from those values. My perspective has changed on a number of fronts, including eschatology, which locally we don't want to hear about that stuff. But if you don't
I'm
have,
interested in that stuff if you want to talk later.
oh, I would be delighted to talk about that. But if we don't have all truth in our box and someone else can have truth from a different perspective and you understand how to see from a different perspective, all of a sudden you become willing to learn and read things and come to a conclusion after you've read rather than taking a position throughout and fighting it every step of the way. Because if you haven't gotten out, I don't believe you can appreciate that in the same manner. And I don't think it's possible to stay in Holland, Michigan, or any little hometown USA and have that broader look. Travel's another way to do the same thing, but not as potent.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
If I can add one perspective to your comment about what is home. I've done a lot of travel around the world. And interestingly enough, for me, I discovered that home was where I felt most authentic and my true self. And oddly enough, that was not at home in the States.
Yeah.
That was other places where I could be who I really was without societal pressure,
Yeah.
familial expectations, and so on.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Cindy. I will add to that. I do a lot of backpacking, and sometimes I feel the most at home when I'm, in the Scottish Highlands, for example, with my pack on, and everything I need is in my pack. And like you said, I can be exactly who I am. There's no layers of expectation heaped on me. In the evenings, I'll stay in the hostels, and you're meeting people from all over the world. And it's just this beautiful, rich experience to just openly express yourself. And yeah, incredible. Like every step, I'm home. I'm home here. This step, I'm at home. I'm home. It's a interesting way to think about it. Anyone else? Yeah.
Two months ago today, I arrived back in Holland after more than 40 years away.
Oh,
So happy
welcome.
anniversary.
Hmm.
When I connected several years ago with my junior high school English teacher, Cynthia DeMage, herself a transplant from the South, she told me, if you move back to Holland, you'll find your people. Maybe that will be true for you as well.
Yeah.
As I listened to what you were saying, it occurred to me that your journey is really the hero's journey. You started out in a particular place. You had encounters of various sorts elsewhere. And as a result, you moved back to Holland with gifts you didn't have in the first place.
That's beautiful. Thank
And
you.
I'll just say one other thing. When you asked the question, what is home? I thought of Robert Frost's poem, Death of a Hired Hand, where he says, home is where when you go there, they have to take you in.
Yes.
From the Zoom community, there's one who says, I've moved to Holland from New Mexico, and I understand the shock of moving into a totally new place and a new culture. It was not easy at all, and the process was a long journey to adapt and still be authentic to myself. I have lived 60 years in Holland, and I have adjusted to the culture, and I still live my life as I wish.
Thanks for sharing that. Well, let's move on here. So one of the things I talked about in my reading was the nostalgia of home, those sights and smells and the sounds and the touch, all of those things around me that just overwhelmed me with this sense of, oh, I'm home. So I just want to take a few minutes. You have a paper and a pen, hopefully. Write down those categories, the 5 senses: sight, sound, smell, taste, touch. And under those, just whatever comes to mind, put down some words that make you think of home. Smells, things to touch, sounds. Let's take 5 minutes or so and do that. Sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. The smell is a good one. 30 seconds if you want to wrap up your thoughts, and then we're going to do some sharing. All right. So is anyone willing to share some of their things that come up?
I didn't grow up in Holland, but I was here. My grandpa taught physics here at Hope. So Holland was always very much a part of my life. And so it has been a coming back, but in the coming back, the things that make me always feel like I'm at home is the minute I hear someone say, "Oh yeah," because no one else said that anywhere else that we live, but "Oh yeah." And then the sound of the lake. For sight, it was sitting in the dentist's office on Washington and realized that I looked out the window, I was seeing my grandparents' house that they retired to. And so those things just bring up, all sorts of memories of them living there. And anytime I see the lake,
Yeah.
for smell, I don't know if anybody else feels this way, but whenever I smell the dill,
Oh,
pine,
yeah.
it's like there's no place else that has that smell. And so again, that's always my mom's first job was writing checks at the Heinz factory when she was in high school. And so it's all those memories and those thoughts that come up, and the lake and Wilhelmina Mints.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Wilhelmina Mints. Touch anytime I feel hot sand under my feet or running through my fingers is a real home thing. And then you're going to laugh at this one, but for taste, it's pig in the blankets.
Oh, yeah.
Because nobody else had pigs. Nobody else understood. Well, they always think it's the hot dogs wrapped up in
Yeah.
crescent rolls, and that's not pigs. And so those memories of my mom and my uncles gathered around and grinding and
Yeah.
putting, really making them. And I'm so happy for DeBoer's.
Yeah.
I can just go pick them up. And the lake, the taste of the lake. So the lake is,
The lake is prominent in your
yeah,
association with home.
yeah,
it sounds
that's
like.
what coming home was, the lake. Where we live now, the first time we stood on the land and we could hear the waves, and my husband and I looked at each other and we're like, now we're home.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Now we're home. So
That's
it's
beautiful.
those waves.
Thanks for sharing that. Others.
I just moved to the Warm Friend, and my one daughter was so upset that I was doing this. I have been in my cottage on Lake Mac now for 13 years, and I'm ready to move on to that next place. And one thing I was thinking about is in feeling there is a palpable love at the Warm Friend. You feel it for everybody who's there and everyone who comes in to visit. It's very palpable. But I realize in the senses that how much Lake Macatawa has meant to me, the smell, the lack of the stink. Now that they're doing all this work to clean Lake Mac, but
I think, well, for me, the number one thing, I grew up in Illinois. And if you've ever taken Highway 57 south out of Chicago, it's like flat. And so for me, when I go someplace flat, it feels like home. Our family came from Canada to Illinois, from the Quebec area, from Montreal, and we didn't realize how archetypal that is for us, but until we went and visited a couple times back after my husband retired. We're both French Canadian heritage. And so we went to Montreal and Quebec and stuff, and the cities were wonderful, but our people were always farmers until, that's why they went to Illinois. And the funny thing is, southern Canada, if you come south from across the St. Lawrence, it's just as flat as Illinois. And it's sort of like,
Yeah.
oh, they must have said, this looks like home, you know, and then
Oh,
in
yeah.
Illinois is like deep, deep, deep dirt. When we moved to Michigan, which was 4 years, we've lived a lot of places, but we moved to Michigan 4 years ago, and I start to dig where we lived in Grand Haven first. We start to dig to plant my garden. It's like, where's the dirt? It's all it's all sand. And
Yeah.
but you know, you have to accommodate it. But anyhow, for us, it's like flat, and people think flat. Who likes flat? I like flat.
Thanks for sharing that.
From the Zoom community, I guess, New Mexico, blowing wind and sand, pinto beans and enchiladas, barbecue, heat 115 degrees in June, and blue skies every day.
Yeah.
Michigan, trees, green, clouds, flowers stand, Dutch pastry, cold winter snow.
That's beautiful. Thanks.
I don't sense this very often anymore because it's not very common for people to smoke a pipe. But whenever I smell the smoke from pipe tobacco, it reminds me of my dad, even though he's been gone for over 75 years.
I share that with you. My dad smoked, he used to make corncob pipes, and that smell is just such a great smell. Not a great habit, but it's a great smell. But my brother and I used to take them. We used to take them because we were concerned about his health. So we would take him and hide him under a floorboard upstairs in the hallway. And my parents were renovating like 15 years ago. They're upstairs and, redoing the floors. And they said, oh, there's a loose board. And they lifted it up, and there was probably 25 corncob pipes under there. So it brought so much back. But yeah, it's that smell. It's a good smell.
Thinking about sight, water, trees, and then I added family and friends, but the water and trees, having lived here, spent lots of time at Glen Lake, where I met you.
Yeah. Yep.
I realized I spent several fall and winter times working at Petrified Forest. And the first thing I said to them, where am I going to find a tree? They said, there's one right outside your window. Yeah, well, maybe it was 10 feet high. It was the only window outside of there. Where do I have to go to find a lake? I had to go an hour south to find a decent sized lake. And they would just laugh at me because what is with your thing with those lakes and the trees?
Yeah.
They were home.
Mm-hmm.
They were home.
Yeah.
Well, that too.
Yeah.
Well, I can see the other side of Glen Lake also. But,
Yeah.
it was that drastic change. I just
Yeah.
wasn't home there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when my husband and I first started church planting, we had a call to middle of Iowa or Traverse City, Michigan. And we visited both, and it was hard to feel at home in the middle of Iowa for all of those reasons as well. So yeah, we went to Traverse City. Yeah.
A few things, smell, the odors of, Mom, do we have to go by that stinky place to go to, when we go over the river?
Oh,
It got,
yeah. Yep.
tulip time, the bands, the laughter,
Mm.
that I remember. Lake Michigan and Macatawa,
Yeah.
part of my life. I was a campfire girl.
Oh.
visiting sites like where my church and school used to be, which don't, in a sense, exist anymore. St. Francis de Sales changed a lot over the time. So it's, where is everything? It's there in heart.
Yeah.
Touching is the ground. Makes me feel good in Holland. Used to go to the parking lots of the grocery stores and look for fossils as a kid.
Oh.
Oh, look what I found. And oh, the taste of grilled cheese sandwiches from Russ's, because
Oh.
I didn't like hamburgers, believe it or not. I always had it, and this grilled cheese still tastes so good.
Yes.
And winter milk cookies.
Mm.
We actually had a little bit of a different experience. I grew up in Chicago, from the South Side. My grade school was right across the street from Midway Airport. So my childhood memories are about like noise. I mean, there was just a constant buzz, a constant hum. You know, we had a postage size stamp yard, so we played in the streets. You know, when we were kids, you played ball and whatnot in the streets or in the alleys. So concrete and noise and energy are kind of like a lot of the sights and sounds of my childhood experience.
Yeah.
Home.
That's interesting. So how, when you're in those kind of spaces now, do you feel that sense of home? Does it, or has that changed for you?
You know, that's interesting. I've only been here about 4 years.
Okay.
And I don't, you know, maybe I was a bit of an adrenaline junkie. And even I did move out of the city, but I worked in the city until I retired. But I moved out a little bit, you know, quasi country in the South burbs. But I've had a really difficult time adjusting. I remember when I moved out to my first home out there, it was so silent. I couldn't sleep at night. I mean, it really unnerved me. So yeah, I think it just kind of became an addiction to the noise and the energy and the buzz. And so it's kind of interesting because yes, it does feel nostalgic.
Yeah.
I've adjusted, but when I hear sirens, it's like, oh, wow, something's going on.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for sharing that. That's a really great perspective. Anyone else want to share anything?
One thing that I wrote down for smell, when I graduated from college, my first job was in Honolulu, Hawaii. And
Oh.
whenever I go back, driving down King Street past the bakery that makes the Portuguese sweetbread and the Hawaiian rolls, I mean, you can smell it a few blocks away. And that's something I always make sure that I experience when I go back there. But Hawaii to me was like Washington, D.C. for you. It just totally opened my eyes. And, you know, I was in that rigid Republican, you have to work hard. And, you know, if you don't have, it's because you're not working hard enough. And there it was such a loving, free environment that it was night and day difference for me, but it was wonderful.
Thanks for sharing that.
Just one more little thing about being older and having moved.
I love all this great advice I'm getting.
From
this morning.
having moved a lot,
Yeah.
you learn to carry your home with you.
Mhm.
And you learn what you really need to keep and what you can let go of. And letting go is one of the best skills that you can learn. And it has to be learned all the time. It doesn't just it's not a one-shot deal. But so there are certain things I need to have. I've learned. And I need to have a kitchen I can cook in, because the smell of cooking is home to me.
Mm.
And I need to have some kind of a garden so I can get outside, even if it's not very big, and putter around. But everybody has their own, you know, irreplaceable things that mean home to them. But I think as you get old, you learn, you know, if you try different places and styles, where the limit is, how far you can change yourself. It's just who you are, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
When you mentioned the cornfields of Iowa, that is home to me.
Mm.
I left there in 1979. And so when I see the cornfields, that brings back memories to me, smell of the manure. But I moved from one Dutch town to Holland.
Okay.
So I grew up in Orange City, Iowa, which is
Mm-hmm.
Reformed, Christian Reformed, you
Yeah.
know, and I felt like moving here, opened my eyes more than what I was exposed to
Sure.
in
Yeah.
Iowa. But and we lived for 15 years in Battle Creek also, so that was a little bit of a change from both areas. But
Mm.
I didn't appreciate the cornfields when I lived there, but
Mm.
now when I go back, because most of my relatives are still there, I see the beauty in them that I missed
Yeah.
when I was living there. So
That's interesting. I have some friends and they live on Lake Michigan, but they grew up in the middle of cornfields in Iowa. And they said as soon as they got to the lake and they heard that sound, it sounded like the wind going through the corn. And they're like, oh, we're home. I'm like, yeah, it's also an upgrade, I think. But
yeah, it's definitely an upgrade. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So we talked about, traveling and feeling home and at home in different places, but has anyone been surprised by some place they've been where they've felt at home?
Out of all our military assignments, we found another location that was somewhat commensurate to Holland in terms of the feel of it, not for the surrounds are obviously quite different, but that was Gig Harbor, Washington, we enjoyed. But oddly, another thing, and it sounds strange, is when you're on a ship, you can still take that sense of security with you. And I don't mean the gigantic ones, I mean the Viking 900 passenger kind. You can still learn, but you got a referential place from home as you're discovering and learning other places. And that confidence you bring with it, who you are, where you're from. You don't have to be talking about it. You just know who you are and you can enjoy seeing other things and learning.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. It's great. Well, I want to touch on one more thing. I'm looking at the clock and I'm seeing that our time is getting short here. We've been talking about home and what it means to us, what it feels like to us. And I just want to shift a little bit and think about what it feels like for people who have to flee their homes, what that experience is like. I don't know if you're familiar with Warsan Shire. She is a British Somali poet. And she writes about home in the context of displacement and exile and trauma. And so she has written this poem called Home, in which she kind of famously redefines home as something people are forced to leave. So I'm going to read this poem, and I just want you to maybe close your eyes and listen and absorb these words from her, and then just see what bubbles up, and we'll, share that afterwards if you're willing. Home. No one leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark. You only run for the border when you see the whole city running as well. Your neighbors running faster than you, breath bloody in their throats. The boy you went to school with, who kissed you dizzy behind the old tin factory, is holding a gun bigger than his body. You only leave home when home won't let you stay. Won't let you stay. No one leaves home unless home chases you. Fire under feet, hot blood in your belly. You have to understand that no one puts their children in a boat unless the water is safer than the land. You have to understand that no one puts their children in a boat unless the water is safer than the land. You have to understand that no one puts their children in a boat unless the water is safer than the land. I want to go home, but home is the mouth of a shark. Home is the barrel of a gun, and no one would leave home. I want to go home, but home is the mouth of a shark. Home is the barrel of a gun, and no one would leave home. I want to go home, but home is the mouth of a shark. Home is the barrel of a gun, and no one would leave home. I want to go home, but home is the mouth of a shark. Home is the barrel of the gun, and no one would leave home. So what do you hear in this poem? What do you think? I mean, in the context of thinking about home and how difficult to flee a home like that and then to come to places that maybe don't want you there either, or, I mean, I just want to hear what some of your thoughts are, what you experienced hearing that poem.
Can you please repeat the author's name?
Oh, yes, the author's name is Warsan Shire, Warsan, and the last name Shire. Any thoughts or feelings or response?
Well, what I heard was a lot of repetition.
Mhm.
And I think that's an important feature of the poem. We humans, when confronted with adversity or trauma, deal with it by talking about it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
That seems a really realistic aspect of the poem to me.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
I've been reading a book called Prairie Fire. And it's, I always loved Laura Ingalls Wilder as a child, read her books as a child, read them to my children. Still love these books. I know she's gone really out of fashion. They removed the Laura Ingalls Wilder Prize for Children's Literature. And I've been wanting to understand why and what the story is. But these stories are all the same. No one leaves home unless there's something worse. I mean, like as a refugee or as a person who's fleeing from one thing to the next thing to the next thing, they're all the same stories. This Prairie Fire book, I recommend it highly. It's a little on the long side, but the first half of it gives me perspective about why the Indians finally fought. In Minnesota particularly, there's a big story, but also why these pioneer people kept coming. None of them had a good time. This was not for fun that anybody did this. And they had no perspective because they were being sold a bill of goods all the time about how the great place was just around the corner. And so this is a really interesting story because we watch it unfold over and over again. And now we're turning ourselves into a country that's like the mouth of a shark again. Anyhow, that's all.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Appreciate that.
I felt like anguish. Just gut wrenching. Oh my gosh, I have to make this decision. And and make a sacrifice and sacrifice my home, and how gut wrenching that would be.
I think, you know, my experience and my kids' experience is home is the place you long to go back to and have a great week with the people, and then you go back to your real life. But I've befriended a young man who's doing odd jobs for me and lawn and stuff. And he grew up in Russia. He was a street kid in Russia, was adopted by a family in Holland, was kicked out of the house and the locks changed, and never visited once in his time on the street here, his going to jail a couple of times. Absolutely no relationship with the people that adopted him and that he lived with for 5 years. And he, as a 26-year-old, is trying very hard to win their love back. I mean, they did nothing for him and made that choice, but he still craves their love. And it's so fascinating. And he was invited once a couple of weeks ago to come for a brat supper, and he was like so thrilled, first time back inside the house. And when I asked him how it was, he said with a disappointed face, "It was okay. I was there 20 minutes and ate 2 brats." And so he didn't feel the warmth that he was craving. And so I think that warmth is what we all want out of home.
Any other thoughts from the poem?
I moved back to Holland from my life in other cities. I would been born here, but I was drawn back when I kind of retired, and my sister offered to find me a place here and take care of things. We found a house, remodeled it. She made a magnificent residence out of it. This by Baker Lofts. My parking lot is from Baker Lofts, is right across the street from me, you know. And I thought, well, this is it. I feel like I'm home. This feels like where I'm gonna live the rest of my life. Well, lo and behold, my sister built her house on the old property of the high school, junior high, the previous one that was built in 1923 or something like that. And she said, well, you really need to put your name in for Midtown Apartments, because you're getting older. You have to mow and you have to shovel snow and those things, you know, you put your name in there because they're going fast. And I said, oh, okay. And here my heart is really attached to where I lived at, and thought, well, this is where I want to be forever. And lo and behold, I got a call from them, and she said, well, you better go say you're going to take it. And so here I am, torn, really torn. I liked working outside my yard, but she had brought me here back to Holland and she'd been working so hard for me and
Yeah.
her place was right next on the back lot of where I am, of the place. So I did move and I miss my old place
Oh,
because I did so much there and it's noisy there, noisier than where I lived.
mm-hmm.
I'm on the 3rd floor. But I'm right by the corner of 16th and River. So, but
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. That's a struggle. Those are
Yeah.
tough transitions
Yeah.
from one home to another and adjusting and
yeah,
trying to feel at home in a place that doesn't feel like home.
right.
It takes time.
And I can't remember names. It's just terrible when you live in an apartment building with all these people, you can't remember their name. Put these name tags. Everybody.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
My story is totally different. I'm an immigrant. I immigrated in 1949 to Holland. And Holland was Holland. And we were not accepted at all.
Where are you from, may I ask?
I'm Latvian.
Okay.
So Baltic Sea countries,
Yeah.
Soviet Union totally destroyed our lives.
Yeah.
My dad never accepted being here. My mother did. I was the youngest of 3, so I didn't know too much. But I can tell you what was my home is nature. That was the only place I felt accepted.
Well,
We spoke a different language.
yeah.
We were not Dutch. So, and that's still with me. Nature is my home.
Yeah. I resonate with that a lot. Next week, we'll be talking a lot about that.
I had another message from the Zoom community. When my study group read the book Exit West, someone asked, why did they go back? A group member quietly said, everyone wants to go home.
Wow, thanks.
The poem itself to me speaks about the grieving cycle. And you have to go through anger and sadness to work your way to acceptance. And that's where you are, and all of us who are aging and changing our lives must be, and you coming home,
Yeah.
And there's always growth
Yeah.
through these tough times.
Yeah.
And I
Thanks
think
for
that
that.
our author
Yeah.
also finds new strengths, and she has enjoyed what she has enjoyed. And I think the repetition was that
Yeah.
you have to accept what was. You can't go.
Thanks for that. Well, I'm going to wrap us up here because I see we're running out of time. So I will just say this in closing, that coming home for me was bittersweet. It was the goodness of the earth that I had, which we'll be talking more about next week, as well as the unconditional embrace of my parents. But also we experienced, which you read about in here, a lot of painful rejection and slander and 1,000 micro messages that told us we were unwanted and unwelcome here. If I've taken anything away from this journey of homecoming, it's a deep desire to create an environment of welcome for all people, regardless of what shape of peg they are, regardless of whether or not their views align with mine or are in direct opposition to mine. Each of us has been shaped by the places we've been, the people we've been surrounded by, the books we've read, by all the various places and communities we have called home. Being aware of all of this hopefully invites a level of humility and generosity and curiosity about others and the kind of hospitality that allows people to feel safely at home in our presence. So that's all I have for you today. And I think we have 10 minutes. If there are any questions or closing thoughts or things you've just been burning to say, you have 10 minutes.
Ask a quick question. I might have missed this. When did you come home? When did you come
So
back?
we came back 10 years ago now. Yep.
Are you still planting churches?
We are.
And are you're planting churches here or?
Yes. Yeah. So we were in the Christian Reformed Church. Excuse me. Something in my throat. When we came back here from DC, we were completely burned out. We were we were very much in the outer boundaries of the Christian Reformed Church. Today, with everything that's gone on in that denomination, we would no longer be accepted, period. We would be kicked out. But we came back and we were done with church planning. We were both working full-time jobs in DC and planting the church and trying to get our kids the help they needed in school, which the schools are very underfunded. And so we were done with ministry, done with church planting. We kept our jobs in DC when we moved here. We were able to do that for a while from a distance. And people started coming to us and saying, hey, will you guys start a church, like the ones you did in DC and Traverse City? And we said, oh no, we're done. We are not doing this anymore. And enough people were coming to us that we finally said, okay, we'll do a backyard Bible study. It's just a Bible study. So people started coming and more people started coming. And then we had professors from the area Christian universities who were coming and Christian Reformed pastors who were coming to this thing. And they were all said, I just need a place where it's safe for me to really dig into this and ask hard questions and really be honest about where I am, because I can't do that in my space. So it kept growing, and then we were taking off to Alaska for a summer road trip. So we went to Alaska, and before we left, people said, well, what are we going to do? And we're like, well, what do you mean? The Bible study is done. We finished it. And then they said, yeah, but this is our community. This is our church. This is our safe space. So we said, when we get back, we'll do another one. We got back from Alaska. We said, okay, we'll do another one. Started another one. And, our house is very small, so we had to move it to someone else's house. We kept growing, and then to someone else's house, we kept growing. And then someone said, hey, can I bring my guitar? There's a great song that goes with this Bible study that we're doing this week. And we were like, okay, but this is not a church, just so we're clear, not a church. And so we started adding songs every week. And then someone one time said, hey, I brought this liturgy. It's really great. It goes along with today's Bible study. And from there, and then finally we were feeling called back into it. But we moved to the United Church of Christ, where we felt a home for sure. And so Holland United Church of Christ is the church that we started in Holland here. So
Thank you.
yeah, and it is a group of people who have not felt at home in other places, or who've been pushed out or kicked out. So it's a really mixed bag of people, and I love it so much. It's great.
That's a good story. Thank you.
Just have a question. I'm not from the area. I've moved here in 2011. I'm a Unitarian Universalist. I don't know what planting churches is.
Oh, great question. Yeah, it might be CRC talk. I'm not sure. Basically, you go to a place so for example, Holland doesn't have a United Church of Christ. And it was a denomination we resonated with, and the people in this group that was growing resonated with. And so it's basically planting a church is starting a new church. So in Traverse City, we were just kind of dropped there and, spent some time getting to know the area, getting to know people, plugging into the community so that we would know what kind of church that community needed. And then we would start a church there, and same thing in DC. So, yeah. Yeah, so we meet on Sundays at 10 o'clock in the Midtown Center, right behind where you live, right? Yeah, in the Midtown Center. So, yep. Yeah. Yes, Glynis goes. We have a lot of retired pastors there. It's interesting. A lot of CRC retired pastors. They come when they're like, okay, now it's safe for me to be here. So it's a really fascinating group, but. My husband, I'm the worship leader. I do the worship. I'm a musician, and he does the preaching, and we both, share pastoral care needs and all of that. So. Oh, it's wonderful. And yeah, and we have an associate pastor, Stephanie Rodriguez. She's our associate pastor. So yeah, there's plenty of people to step in when we need to get away.
That sounds really ideal for staff people to have all these talented people, all this talent.
And
in
wisdom.
your-
And Glynis is one of those retired pastors. Yes, UCC.
It's, no, not too many chefs, but I think, I don't know how to say this nicely. When you have, when you have retired pastors in your community, you get the opportunity to bounce theological stuff off, but then there's always kind of that, I don't know, preaching for colleagues can be, there's just, it's kind of like, you kind of want to always check in going, oh, so what did you think about that? And it's hard as a retired person not to say, well, let me tell
Yes,
you.
yeah.
So it can be a delicate dance, but I think it's pretty.
Yeah. We say at Holland UCC, we're like a quarter of us are former pastors, and most of the rest are in some field of the mental health.
Yeah.
Like that's what most people are, therapists and counselors. And then there's all those that the therapists and the counselors have recommended come to our church, and that it would be a safe place for them. So it's a really interesting.
It's very eclectic, but it's fun.
Well, thank you very much, everyone today. Thank you, Christy, for
Yeah,
this
thank
thoughtful
you.
and engaging dialogue.